Welcome, everybody, to Liberty Hour. I am your host, Alex Newman, here on American Media Periscope. Thank you for tuning in. It is great to have you with us. We've got a powerful lineup for you today. Incredible guests, Kari Lake, Abraham Hamilton III, and also one of the prisoners from January 6th who's got quite a story. You're going to be blessed by hearing it. But first, we got the news. Huge news happening in Congress right now, folks. The House Oversight Committee has just released a 14-year timeline of the Biden crime family and their influence peddling, including selling our country out to the communist Chinese and many others. In November of 2013, you see here on this timeline, Biden and the Chi-Coms created Bohai Harvest RST Investment Fund Management, controlled by the Bank of China. This was used for mergers and acquisitions. So this is Hunter Biden at work here. Next month, Joe Biden goes to China, and suddenly BHR, this company, gets a business license, and Hunter is added to the board of directors. And then after that, BHR starts funneling money into communist Chinese controlled oil and chemical companies, and then it joins with other CCP interests to acquire Henniges Auto and other companies. All along, the Bidens are getting all kinds of weird payments to shell companies that they're creating. Same thing going on in Kazakhstan and Ukraine and Romania. Folks, this is unbelievable. Plus, last week we had the IRS whistleblower Joseph Ziegler confirming in sworn testimony to Congress that Biden crime family received around $17 million in bribes from China, Romania, and other countries in exchange for political favors. We've got Senator Chuck Grassley releasing the FBI document showing Biden was involved in a $10 million bribery scheme with Burisma CEO Mykola Zlochevsky. This FD 1023 from then Vice President Joe Biden actually forced this Ukrainian oligarch to pay him and his son Hunter almost $10 million for these political favors. Now, Rudy Giuliani, the attorney, he was just on War Room, said that the evidence collected against the Biden crime family is the strongest case I've ever seen. He actually said this was more evidence than they had in New York in the 1980s when they took down the mafia families. Now, Jim Hoft of Gateway Pundit, always an astute analyst, he says that the walls have closed in. They're going to try to claim some sort of medical emergency. They're going to end up resigning so that basically they can just shuffle Biden off stage and then say, well, he's got a medical emergency. He's going to just have to, rest in peace. Leave him alone. That was yesterday's news. Obviously, folks, here's what Jim Hoft said. He says, Republican leadership and the Uniparty members will breathe a sigh of relief that they will not be forced to go through with impeachment proceedings. They will tell us this is not who we are. Just watch. In other Biden news, Elizabeth Hirsch Naftali, a mega donor for the Democratic Party who was buying a bunch of weirdo Hunter Biden art for enormous sums of money, and then just coincidentally, I'm sure, got picked for a very nice Biden commission. Turns out this individual has visited the White House 13 times in 18 months. I guess if you buy terrible art from Crackhead related to the president, you get lots of invitations to the White House. So, mega donor. Now, just 8 months after Hunter's weirdo art exhibition opened, Joe Biden appointed this individual to this heritage board. And somebody ought to be asking some questions about this art. Also, more Joe Biden news. You probably saw the judge in the case rejected the Hunter Biden plea deal with the Department of Justice. This would have actually quashed all remaining investigations. It would have kept Hunter Biden out of jail. And there's more to this story, actually. Apparently, Hunter Biden lawyers pretended to be Republican lawyers, and they asked to remove a GOP filing in the case. Pretty amazing. So the judge is now threatening to sanction these lawyers, and the Biden lawyers are saying, oh, that was just an unintentional miscommunication. Nothing to see here. Folks, imagine if a conservative lawyer for Donald Trump did something like that. Oh, man, they'd be disbarred faster than you could say it, disbarred. Now, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is getting left behind by his own caucus, and so he suggested kind of laid back, maybe this is starting to approach the level of criminality that requires an impeachment inquiry. But then he walked it back. He said, I wasn't announcing an impeachment inquiry. I was simply saying that the actions that I'm seeing by this administration, withholding the agencies from being able to work with us, that would rise to the level of an impeachment inquiry. And then he re-contradicted himself. He says, we still have a number of investigations going forward now. The committees are working in good faith. They're finding new information all the time. And then he went to Twitter and said, if evidence continues to rise to the level of an impeachment inquiry, House Republicans will act. And so going back to what Jim Hoft said prepare for a mysterious medical emergency that's going to require Biden to be shuffled off stage and maybe put into an old folks' home. Meanwhile, the Bidens, the media, and the Democrats are trying to silence us all to make sure we don't talk about these things. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas is in big trouble for this. Representative Harriet Hagman, brilliant grilling of this Secretary of Homeland Security, not just for the open borders, but also for trying to silence us. She says he's exactly the type of tyrant that our founding fathers warned about. Watch.
Mr. Mayorkas, I actually really want to thank you as well for coming here today, for your performance. I have watched with absolute fascination as you have danced and dodged and lied. Yes, lied. We know you've lied, you know you've lied, but more importantly, the American public knows that you lied throughout your testimony today. And yet you believe that you and your fellow architects of the censorship industrial complex think that you should be able to determine what is and isn't true, and what is and isn't untrue. You are the walking, talking epitome of the very tyrant that our forefathers recognized would gravitate towards government service. And it is because of people like you that they drafted the First Amendment. I thank them for their foresight. I thank them for recognizing that you and people like you would do everything in your power to control speech, to control freedom, to take away our rights. And they've written a document that isn't going to allow you to do that. Unfortunately, we still have courts and judges who recognize that you don't have the power that you are attempting to take, that you do not have the right to limit our freedom of speech, our freedom of association, our right to communicate. Thank God we have the First Amendment so that we can stop you from doing what you've been doing. With that, I yield back.
Take that, Secretary Mayorkas. Oh, man, can you imagine Liz Cheney saying something like that? Oh, man, I love it. Representative Hagman is just a real treasure for our country. Now, along with open border king Mayorkas, the Biden regime is working to make, in fact, has made the citizenship test radically easier. More than 1 million people were sworn in as U.S. citizens last year as Joe Biden opens up the border. They want as many newcomers as possible. And already, folks, according to news reports, America has the easiest citizenship test in the world. All you got to do is get 6 out of 10 really easy, ridiculous questions, some of them fake, to be able to become a citizen. So isn't that cute? They want lots of new Democrats, and that's all there is to it. Now, as the media keeps trying to hide the truth about all this, they are losing big time. A little bit of Schadenfreude here. The Washington Compost, the personal propaganda outlet of Jeff Bezos and Amazon, the Bilderberger, looking at massive losses, $100 million loss in 2023 if things continues. And that's I think, kind of exciting. They did have a little bit of a boom during the Trump years, but now they're just such bootlickers for Joe Biden that, hey, people are not really interested in reading. Folks, down in Brazil, terrible things. In fact, they had almost an exact replica of January 6th down in Brazil, except theirs happened on January 8th. They had a fake, agent provocateur running around and invading the Congress building and so on. But now 50 Brazilian lawmakers are actually going to file a complaint with the UN Human Rights Council about mistreatment and abuse of the January 8th prisoners by the Marxist regime of Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. This is huge news, folks, but unfortunately, I suspect that the dictator-controlled UN Human Rights Council is not going to be all that concerned, but hey, might as well make the complaint, right? Speaking of the United Abominations, the UN is seeking a global AI agency. The Socialist Secretary General, and I'm not just using that term, he was actually the leader of the Socialist International before taking over the UN. He says, look no further than social media, right? Tools and platforms designed to enhance human connection are now used to undermine elections and spread conspiracy theories and even to incite hatred. So in other words, they want to regulate AI so that they can silence you. And unfortunately, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas Greenfield, has promised to work toward consensus around common frameworks because, yeah, the Chi-Coms will just be so friendly to these ideas, and you bet they will because they're going to use it against you. Now, the climate hysteria is heating up, folks. The fake news is trying to claim that global warming is actually to blame for all the heart attacks and the clots and the strokes. Turns out it's not global warming, it's the shot, but don't tell the liars in the fake media that. But folks, people are speaking out. In fact, the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics recipient, Dr. John Clauser, has just criticized the fake climate hysteria, calling it a dangerous corruption of science that threatens the world's economy and the well-being of billions of people. And of course, it does. Now, Kamala Harris, in a remarkable moment of honesty, revealed that the real goal is actually reducing the population. Check it out.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population, more of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
We're going to reduce the population so that more of our children. Wait, what? Okay. Folks, don't think that this is just, one lunatic in Washington, D.C. Here's Congressman Democrat Cori Bush, who hates America so much that on the 4th of July, she said, we need reparations. Quite ironic. But she says killing a baby with abortion pills is kind of like taking a Tylenol for a headache. Now, the one big difference, obviously, is that there's a dead baby. But here, check it out.
These 5 pills are effective. Medication abortion pills, like mifepristone, safe again, effective again, no different from any other medication that's safe and effective. The FDA has declared medication abortion safe for the past 23 years. Using mifepristone together with misoprostol is a 97.7% effective way to terminate a pregnancy. Mifepristone is used worldwide and already accounts for over 50% of abortions in this country. Medication abortion is a lifeline. It's a lifeline for the person.
It's a lifeline. Yeah, killing your baby is a lifeline. And it's very safe. Unless you're the baby, in which case it's not so safe. Now, Margaret Sanger is probably smiling from the pit of hell. The founder of Planned Parenthood, of course, was a very big proponent of eliminating black people and others through eugenics, through sterilization, and through birth control. She actually hired black ministers to promote population control among black Americans. But as she wrote in a letter, she didn't want the word to get out that they were trying to exterminate the Negroes, as she put it. Here she is speaking to the Ku Klux Klan about how dangerous it is to have all these black people running around. Cori Bush doing the bidding of racists everywhere. And of course, feminists now, they say they're going to get sterilized to protest the Dobbs decision protecting babies from abortion. Pretty interesting. You've got actual women, or at least people who identify as women, saying that, we are going to sterilize ourselves. This Dr. Jenny Hauschka, Trion Women's Center in Charlotte, North Carolina, says in the past year, I've had at least 50% more consultations than before. Abortion is referenced as an aside. They'll say if something were to happen, I don't have that to fall back on anymore. So there are people who are now going out to get sterilized because they can't kill their babies anymore. Very bizarre. Meanwhile, John Kerry's flying around the world in a private jet to lecture us about how dangerous global warming is. Congress is starting to look into this, but these policies being pursued by the Biden administration is absolutely crushing Americans. About 72,000 families with children in homelessness in 20 cities across America as of January. That's almost a 40% jump from the year before. Comes amid massive inflation, slow wage growth, and folks, guess what? These are mostly Democrat cities, but you can thank Joe Biden and the Federal Reserve for that. Now, West Australian landowners are going to have to pay $160 an hour to obtain soil disturbance permits from Indigenous peoples. Because apparently Indigenous peoples lived there once, and so now you can't farm unless you give money to the tribal chieftains. Truly incredible. Folks, this is just simply crazy. We've got to put a stop to this. Stay with us. We'll be right back with our first guest, Kari Lake.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900.
Welcome back to Liberty Hour, everybody. I'm your host, Alex Newman. Thanks so much for tuning in to amp our next guest, the great Kari Lake. I'm sure you know her. She needs no introduction, but she's got a new book out, Unafraid, Just Getting Started. She's also had a distinguished career in the news industry. She became a symbol of truth in journalism by rejecting the agenda-driven press. She also decided to run for governor in 2022 and won with the endorsement of Donald Trump, but some shenanigans happened, and that is still working its way through the court system. She believes in secure borders, energy independence, and putting America first. She's a voice for the silent majority, and she fights back against the relentless assaults on our freedom by the radical left. So it's an honor to have her. Kari, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for joining us. Your new book, it's got the foreword written by Donald Trump, Unafraid. Walk us through, what does it mean to be unafraid? What does it mean that you're just getting started?
Well, thank you for having me, Alex. I'm so proud of the book. And I think there's a message in there for everyone that we are in difficult times. And I know there's a lot of fear out there because we don't know where things are going. Every day we wake up, the world seems to be a little bit more out of control. And when you have that fear, you can actually recoil and become somebody who doesn't get involved, doesn't do anything to help the situation, or you can walk through your fear and go through what makes you afraid and scared, and then come out on the other side truly unafraid. And I talk about in the book a couple of things that in my life happened where I had to kind of walk through my fears. And I do believe that it only does make you stronger. And so the book title is great. Donald Trump Jr. actually came up with the title. We were brainstorming one day as we were writing the book, and I was writing the book, and we were talking about what we wanted to call it. And he said, how about Unafraid? I think that really, describes you well and describes some of the stories that you put in the book. So I said, that's perfect. That's what we're going to call it. And then we added the just getting started, because so many people said, okay, what is she going to do next? What's Kari going to do next? And a lot of the swamp type creatures have been worried that I might get back into politics and wondering what I'm going to do next. So I kind of wanted to put the just getting started to let those people know, you can't get rid of me. You can't get rid of us, we the people. We are more connected as people and determined right now to save our country. And we're not going away. Even when they steal elections, we're still going to stay there. We're still going to fight, and we're still going to get out there and help save this country.
Amen. Fantastic message. Kari, you, of course, have been in protracted litigation now surrounding the election shenanigans in 2022. Give our audience an update. What's going on with those legal proceedings, and what are your next steps?
Well, we're still in the court system. We're going to the appellate court. We wanted to skip right over to the Arizona Supreme Court, but it looks like the Supreme Court will not take our case expedited, and we're going to have to work our way through the appellate court, and we're fine with that. We have the evidence. We have 100% proof that they stole this election. They stole our victory. They disenfranchised the voters of Arizona, and we're going to prove that in court. Unfortunately, we don't always get judges who have the courage to do the right thing, to look at the evidence and rule for the people. But I think as more and more evidence comes out, and every day we get more new evidence on how they rigged this election in 2022 in Arizona, and we believe eventually a judge will do the right thing. Unfortunately, our judicial system is compromised as well. The corruption isn't just in the elections. The corruption really is from top to bottom, bottom to top, and left to right. And we're exposing a lot of that. And we believe that eventually there will be a courageous judge who does the right thing. And we have to fight this in the court system right now. That's what our options are. And we have an incredible case. We know that they sabotaged Election Day. They rolled out equipment that didn't work. They put it in Republican areas. They knew 75% of the people voting on Election Day were voting for me. And they couldn't have somebody, the deep state in Arizona, the swamp, couldn't have somebody like me, because my number one priority was going to be to shut down the illegal activity at the border, stop the human smuggling, stop the trafficking of children and drugs. And that's an operation that's far too fruitful for them. And they make way too much money on it. And they didn't want to have someone like me going in there and stopping it. So they had to steal the election, and they did, just like they did in 2020, stealing the election from Donald J. Trump. But we're not going to put up with it anymore. And we're going to fight back.
And we're so thankful that you're doing that, Kari, and also Donald Trump. You guys are just fighters, and we appreciate it very much. Now, you just put out on Twitter a recent comment saying that Runbeck placed an order for the world's largest order for ballot stuffing machines months before anybody had ever suggested that we need mass mail-in voting due to COVID-19. Talk to the audience. What does that mean? Who is Runbeck? What were they doing? And what does this show?
Runbeck is the private company that the county, hires to print our ballots, and they have a lot of involvement in taking in the mail-in ballots, getting them mailed out. They're a big player in our elections, and I'm just throwing that out. That is curious, isn't it? That in early March, rather, this company made the largest order for ballot envelope stuffing equipment before anybody even suggested or knew we were going to go, all mail-in ballots, or we were going to push mail-in ballots. I think it's curious. I think we deserve an explanation from the company that how did they know to order that equipment? Just as COVID was happening, how did they know this was going to happen? Because it sure seems curious, I'll just put it that way, that they would know to months in advance to order this equipment. Before anybody even talked about doing massive mail-in ballots.
Yeah, it is curious indeed. And I think it'd be good for the American people to get some answers on this. Now, there's a lot of interesting questions on stuff like this. Like most Americans, obviously, you followed closely what happened in 2020, right after the election. We know that there were the audits and the hearings held in Arizona, specifically in Maricopa County. And Colonel Waldron shared at one of those meetings information about Seidel, the Spain-based elections company run by a guy called Jonathan Brill, who just coincidentally, I'm sure, has worked on a lot of Democrat campaigns for federal and state. We know that one of the investors in Seidel is In-Q-Tel, and we know that the chairman of In-Q-Tel, Michael Crow, is an Arizona guy. He's actually running Arizona State University. There seems to be all these troubling connections. You mentioned the swampy deep state. How deep is this swamp? And was there any involvement with these things in the 2022 election? And has any of that come up in legal proceedings so far?
These are just all, when you start digging into our elections, you realize that this is a web of deceit and corruption with tentacles that go far and wide, tentacles that go to China and to other nations. I mean, our elections should be so secure. No other country in the world should have anything to do with our elections. And we don't have to be this, our elections don't have to be this complicated. We don't have to have all these shady people involved in our elections. They should be done very locally. And there's not a reason that we can't go back to the way that we used to do elections when elections were fair and honest, which is a paper ballot, which is election day, not election month, where you count on election evening and you have the results by the end of the evening. You don't have to wait 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 days for results. And we know they've made it more complicated because they are cheating. And it's a lot easier to cheat when the system is very complicated and drawn out and protracted. And they protracted election day to becoming a month-and-a-half ordeal where there's so much fraud in there. And it's really hard to peel back all those layers of the onion. But we are certainly doing that in our case. I mean, we found out not too long ago that the software they used for the entire Maricopa County election was not even approved software. It was not the certified approved software. They used a different software. We have video showing them opening up the seals on the machines, breaking the seal on the machine and putting in new memory cards. They knew in advance that these machines would fail at 59% failure. And they rolled out those machines knowing they would fail, we believe intentionally on election day so that they would fail. And they would cause huge lines and people's ballots would be spit out. 250,000 times on election day, ballots were spit out unreadable because they intentionally printed the wrong image on the ballot. We had a 20-inch ballot. They printed a ever so slightly smaller image, a 19-inch image rather than that 20-inch image. And by doing that, it was not detectable to the voter. The voter wouldn't look at the ballot and think there's something wrong with it. But let me tell you, there was something seriously wrong with the ballot. When you put the wrong image on it, you enter it into, you slide it into the tabulator machine, the machine doesn't even recognize it because it's the wrong image. I mean, this is how disgusting these people are. They are un-American. I believe this theft of our election, the theft of our victory, the trampling of our sacred vote, I believe it is almost a traitorous act to do that. And I can't believe these people can even live with themselves. And we're going to continue to talk about it, even though they're trying to sue me for defamation for talking about our elections. And we're not going to stop. And so I hope if they're watching this, they know we will never stop, and we will reveal each and every one of these people for who they are. And I believe they're criminals because they are truly trampling on our sacred right to vote and taking our voice away, our voice at the ballot box.
Amen. 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 Thank you for that, Kari. We're down to just a few minutes left. I want to turn back to your book real quick. Now, one of the things you talk about in your book is kind of your relationship with the news media, how that propelled you to doing what you do now. And you say in the book that your initial plan was actually never to speak to the fake news, and then you realized you could use them to your advantage. What was the interview that changed your mind on that?
Yes, that's one of the stories in the book. I mean, I come from the news. I walked away from my 30-year career, 27 years in Arizona. At the height of my career, number one, I walked away from a 7-figure contract because I just didn't feel that it was honest anymore. I felt that journalism became propaganda, and it seemingly happened very quickly, especially with the aid of the whole COVID pandemic. And that they were pushing propaganda, and I didn't want to be part of that. And so when I ended up in politics, when the people of Arizona recruited me to run and said, please run, we trust you and we want you to run for governor, I said, I'm not going to do any interviews with the fake news. They're untrustworthy, they're biased, and I don't want to work with them. But one of the members on my team convinced me to do one short interview, and immediately the interview went off the skids when the reporter, it was very obvious he was doing a hit piece on me. And so I got very angry. I on the inside, I was so angry. I was enraged at this reporter. And I got through the whole interview, and I called Ross, who was on my team, and I said, Ross, I wish I wouldn't have done that. I'm so mad that I did that. It really went horribly. I lost my cool. It's going to look really bad. And as I'm telling him this, my husband is like rewinding the interview and watching it. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. This thing is great. You worked that guy over, and you made him look like the fool he is. So we looked back at it, and that's when I realized that even though on the inside I was very upset, very angry at this reporter, on the outside I kept it very calm, and I was able to make my point and actually kind of show the world how slimy these people are. So it was at that moment, having that first interview, that made me realize, actually I do need to do these interviews, and I think I can show the world how dishonest the news media is and how they're truly working against our country.
Yeah, between you and Trump, calling out the very fake news, there's millions and millions of Americans who just so appreciate that. And, I'm sure a lot of Americans would actually seriously like to see you as a possible running mate for Donald Trump in 2024. Any thoughts on that before you tell us how to get the book and where to follow you?
Well, this is something that President Trump is so powerful and so strong and such a great leader. It really does. I think it doesn't even matter who he picks. He is going to be the ticket. And it doesn't really matter who he picks. And I'm going to help him. I want to make sure he gets elected. I'm going to do anything I can to help him. And I'm really seriously considering a run for Senate here in Arizona, because we have an opportunity to pick up a Senate seat and take it out of the hands of these radicals who are doing nothing for Arizona, and put it in the hands of somebody who will put Arizona first and America first. So I'm considering that. In the meantime, I'm going to do whatever I can to help President Trump. If that means I can continue to speak about his incredible Agenda 47, which is going to get America back on track, I will do that. I speak in support of him because as a mom, I know he's the man to get this country back on track, and frankly, get the world back on track, get us on steady footing on a world stage as well. And so I don't ask for anything in return except that he gets in there and turns things around and saves our country.
Excellent. And Kari, how can people follow you? What's the best way to get updates? And also, what's the best place to get the book?
You can follow me at Kari Lake, Karilake, on Twitter and Getter and Truth and all the social media. And you can find my book at Amazon or barnesandnoble.com. It's in bookstores. And you can also find it on my website, karilake.com. If you want to order it directly from the publisher, you can order it at karilake.com and find it right there. It's a great book. It's a great read. It came from the heart. It wasn't written by a consultant like many politicians do. This came from the heart. It was written in the few months following our our stolen victory. So it's got a lot of emotion in it. And I take you through how exactly they stole this election from the people, not just from me, but from the people of Arizona. And it's a page turner. I throw a few punches and where punches are needed. And I think people will really like it. The response I've gotten has been, oh my gosh, I read this in 2 sittings. It was so amazing. I wish it would have never ended. I mean, I'm getting really great response. So I'm really proud of it.
Well, Kari Lake, Unafraid, and just getting started. Thank you so much for all that you do for our country. Thank you for joining us today. God bless you.
Thank you, Alex. We appreciate you.
All right, take care. All righty, folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after this quick break with Abraham Hamilton III. You're not going to want to miss it.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and my employees and I want to thank each and every one of you for your continued support. With everything going on right now, your rest is so important. That's why we're having the biggest MyPillow sale ever. Not only are my bed pillows as low as $19.98, but you can get the best body pillows ever. Regular $89.98, now only $29.98. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Please order now while quantities last.
Welcome back to Liberty Hour. Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed Kari Lake. What an extraordinary individual. Our next guest is Abraham Hamilton III. He is a general counsel and public policy analyst for the Great American Family Association. If you're not familiar with them, if you're not involved, you should be. They've got like 2 million members all across the world. Wonderful organization on the front lines of the culture war, and Abraham is a critical part of that. He's also a husband, father of 6 wonderful children. He's a lawyer. He's a homeschool dad. He's a teaching pastor at his local church. And he does so much. I don't know how he has time for it all. He's got an undergraduate degree in New Testament biblical literature from Oral Roberts University. And he's got a JD degree, a law degree from Loyola University in New Orleans College of Law. He's also a member of the Louisiana State Bar Association, the Houston Bar, the Texas Bar, the Federal Bar Association. He's licensed to practice law all over the place, Texas, Louisiana, and, of course, the federal courts. He's been a criminal prosecutor, and he has handled major felony prosecutions at the trial level. Also, his ministerial focuses include marriage, family apologetics, biblical worldview training, discipleship formation, and preaching. He also has an incredible show on American Family Radio that goes out nationwide. I first came across him when he was exposing some of the occultism with the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we brought him on today to talk about what's happening in our public schools. Abraham, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. What is going on in the public schools? I think there's a lot of ignorance, but they're training our children not to serve God or understand the Bible, but for other things. As you understand it, what's happening?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, my wife and I, we have 6 children, and we made the decision to homeschool our children, but it's not because we were introduced to homeschooling socially or culturally. Nobody around us homeschooled. What ended up happening is my wife and I did a deep dive before we had our first son into studying the history of education in our country. And we began to realize the things that are happening are not just coincidental occurrences. They're actually the product of intentional forming and framing. For example, the National Assessment of Educational Progress just released its standards that revealed that American students in middle schools, elementary schools, and even high schools are performing even worse than before in civics and in history. Now that seems like a consistent repeating phenomenon with public schooling all across our country, because scores are also going down in mathematics and other things. Well, the former dean of education at Harvard University, Dr. Chester Pierce, addressed an international gathering of educators in 1972. And in 1972, he said this in his speech, quote, "Every child in America entering school at the age of 5 is mentally ill because he comes to school with certain allegiances to our founding fathers, toward our elected officials, toward his parents, toward a belief in a supernatural being, and toward the sovereignty of this nation, America, as a separate entity. It is up to you as teachers to make all of these sick children well by creating the international child of the future," end quote. Now, if you have educators saying that children, when they come to school at the age of 5, they come sick, and evidences of their sicknesses are belief in God, belief in America as a separate and sovereign entity, allegiance toward their own parents, and it's the job of the educators to make those 6 children well, you begin to get a glimpse into the reality that declining history and civic scores and the increase among America's students to where they kind of have a disdain for the United States of America, you begin to realize, this is not a casual coincidence. This is the product of intentional planning and strategy implemented long ago.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. For the folks out there who doubt it, just go study the history of where the system came from. I mean, it was created by primarily people who rejected God, who rejected the Bible, and who wanted to overturn our system of government. And now we're seeing the fruit of that. Abraham, you argue, and I have argued as well, that the schools are actually teaching religion. It's just not true religion. It's just not the religion of the Bible. Break that down for us. So what are they teaching our children in school in terms of worldview and religious values?
Yeah, I mean, even the United States Constitution, I'm not the Constitution, United States Supreme Court has acknowledged that atheism is in fact a religion. Religion, the word religion, I know people kind of eisegete that term and project onto what they believe, but religion just means a deeply held set of beliefs. Well, the reality is there's no such thing as neutral. When we have a system that we call it education, but I think that description should be challenged in and of itself, because the scripture says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. But when we have a system that systematically excludes from the cultivation of the children's minds the context for the discoveries and things of that nature, we are not educating them. For example, many young people in our country are taught about, Sir Isaac Newton and the laws of motion, and the laws of thermodynamics. But what is excluded from their purview is the fact that Isaac Newton can rightly be described as a theologian who adopted science as a hobby. Isaac Newton wrote exponentially more about God in the Bible than he did about any of his scientific discoveries. But if our children are denied knowing that part of Isaac Newton's life, are they truly getting a proper education? No. What they're getting is an indoctrination that intentionally strips away any orientation concerning God, that removes the capacity to properly and objectively evaluate Western civilization, and to properly and to appreciate the uniqueness of the United States of America. All of this is being done intentionally. So when you ask the question, what are they being presented with? I say on my show, and I didn't intend for this to become a catchphrase or anything, but it became a part of my introduction for my show, that darkness is not an affirmative force, but it merely reoccupies the space that is vacated by the light. So when we have a system of instruction that intentionally conceals context from facts and figures being communicated, when we have, for example, mathematics being presented, but separated from the fact, for example, 2 + 2 = 4, but that is presented separate from the fact that the only way we can have a system that allows for the scientific method, for repetition, for observation and experimentation, is that we have to have a fixed universe. If we deny those aspects from our children's cultivation and their worldview, we are perpetuating a godless religious system, which is why we have the society that we have. It's not that people don't have deeply held beliefs. It's that those beliefs, by and large, are increasingly exclusionary to the knowledge of God.
That's right. It's so true, and we're seeing the fruit around us as society collapses, families collapse. It's just horrific what's happening. Abraham, this is a question that I think a lot of us are wrestling with right now. I have said for years that, it's unreformable. But what are your views? You've got a lot of people that are putting a lot of energy right now into trying to fix the system. They say, well, maybe we can bring the Bible back into school. Maybe if we tweak the standards, we can fix this and make the schools okay again. What is your view? How do we deal with this problem going on with the public schools?
Yeah, I hate to be a Debbie Downer, and I have people tell me all the time, hey, the education system is failing. And I always say, wait. In order for you to make a proper and an objective assessment as to whether something is succeeding or failing, you have to know what the intentions were at its foundation. There is no way you can have a system that is the stated purpose is, we want children to be smarter, things of that nature. But is that truly the intended purpose behind the scenes? There's no way you can have a system where I just referred you to the National Assessment for Educational Progress, to where the scores are continuously failing and all across the board, science, mathematics, even we're at the place where now people are saying things like the proper articulation of the English language is evidence of racism. What are we talking about here? What are we talking about here? There's no way we can have that in place. And then we're throwing trillions upon trillions of dollars in that direction. And yet we're saying the system is failing. Honestly, I would argue the system is not failing at all. It's operating as it has been intended to operate. As Chester Pierce said, the interest is not in reading, writing, and arithmetic, as that is the stated publicly perpetuated purpose, but the intended purpose is what Chester Pierce said, to create the international child of the future. to make America more easily moldable into really a godless, socialist, Western version of what we have of the European Union, to make that more easily accomplished. And so, simply put, I know that, and I don't mean to malign any teachers or administrators individually, because I know we have good people that are involved in the system, but the reality is the system is not changing its corpus. And so we have a system, I describe it this way: it's a train that's going full steam ahead due south, but you have people putting all of their energy and their might running as fast as they can northward on a train that's traveling south. Guess where the train is going to end up? No matter how strong, fast, or hard people try to run north on that train, it is going to end up south, which is what we're having. So simply put, I do not believe it's reformable. I strongly believe what we need to do is return to what our founders did in the country, because the reality is us educating our children through our homes was standardized. That's what our founding fathers enjoyed. That was normalized. It wasn't until we ceded this ground until the government says, okay, well, we'll take your children and then we will form them and shape them in the image that we want to form and shape them in. And that is how we got to where we are in our country. People ask me, how do we get to this place in America? Well, I'll tell you, we discipled our way into it. And discipleship includes the training and the cultivation of the mind. And we have trained and cultivated our way by affirmative action, as well as a combination of ignorance and negligence, into where we are in this country right now at this present moment.
Now, you're speaking my language, Abraham. I couldn't agree with you more. Of course, I homeschool my own 5 children, and you couldn't pay me enough money to subject them to what passes for public school today. Just inconceivable. So what's your message out there, Abraham, to parents who are maybe struggling with this? Well, maybe I can just unbrainwash the kids when they come home. We'll make sure we have dinner together, and I'll tell them that all the transgenderism and the left wing is the atheism, the humanism, all that is wrong, and I'll just unbrainwash them. What's your message to parents out there who have school-age children and are considering these questions?
Yeah, I mean, people that have the position that you just kind of summarized, I would point them to Charles Francis Potter. Charles Francis Potter, who's also a signer of the Humanist Manifesto, by the way, wrote in a book called Humanism, A New Religion in 1930. This is from page 128 in his book. He said, quote, "Education is thus the most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can theistic Sunday schools do, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children? What can they do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching?" End quote. In 1930, Charles Francis Potter realized that the most fundamental component of shaping the hearts and minds of children is time. And he rightly pointed out that what can you do if you have only a fraction of the children for only a fraction of the time, in comparison to a full-on 5 days a week, at a minimum of kindergarten to 12th grade, of full-on anti-Christ indoctrination. My encouragement is, as parents, to realize the valuable trust that God has given you. What could be more important than what we do with our children? There are things in this country, and you may know a little bit of my background. I tell people this all the time. I'm from the hood. Thank God that he saved me, but he saved me from the New Orleans inner cities and opened my eyes. And what I realized is that people make sacrifices to accomplish and to procure things that are important to them. Where I grew up, where we went to go find the latest cars, the flashiest rims, and things of that nature, we went to the projects. Because though we had people in our country who may have been impoverished, but American poverty is a lot different from poverty globally. Even those who may be struggling and suffering in our own country, they prioritize the things that are important to them. I would simply say, what is more important to us than our children? We make sacrifices for the things that we care about. Some of us, we save annually so we can take vacation. We'll make adjustments. We'll work more hours in this area. We'll do other things in this area. I would simply say, what is more important than our children? We only get to shape them for a short amount of time. Worldviews usually are set by the time they're about 13 years old. After that, it's hard, to do any shaping. You want to shape a vase when the mud is wet. Once it hardens, it's a whole lot more difficult to shape. I would simply say, do your own homework too. Don't just take my word for it. Do your own homework. Do some studying into the history of the education system in America, the public education system. And as you do that, then conclude, can I accomplish God's purpose for him giving these children to me if I cede my authority to government schools to disciple them, first and foremost, shaping their minds and their hearts in the process?
Amen. Real words of wisdom right there, Abraham. I couldn't agree with you more. So you were a former criminal prosecutor. Of course, you still are a lawyer. You're working now with AFA. The judicial system in America seems to me and to a lot of people to be just completely off the rails now. Double standard of justice, to put it mildly. Everything to protect the Bidens and the Clintons, everything to take down the Trumps and other people who stand against the madness happening. What's your view on what's happening with our judicial system right now? And what do you suggest that Christians and people who love liberty do to try to protect themselves and protect our country and our freedoms from the situation we find ourselves in?
Yeah, well, I think it's important for people to realize, thankfully, that we are blessed to be the inheritors of a constitutional republic with democratic features. I always cringe when people describe our country as a democracy because our founding fathers intentionally and expressly rejected the concept of absolute democracy. One of the major features of our constitutional Republican form of government, as guaranteed by Article 4 of the Constitution, is that we have a federal system and we have state level systems. And so your reference to what's happening with the Bidens and others at the federal level, it simply reveals that at the highest levels of the federal law enforcement and governmental apparatus, that it has been completely politicized and corrupted at that point. But thankfully, we do have a divergence to a degree and various state levels and state systems, those that are closest to the people. And so one of the major things that I've been encouraging people to do is to live locally. Yes, be aware of what's happening on the global scene. Yes, be aware of what's happening at the national level, but do not allow those things to manipulate you to such a degree where you are perpetually ignorant as to what's happening right where you live, right where you are. You have the opportunity to influence local sheriffs. You have the opportunity to influence local police departments. You can become a local police officer. You can become a local sheriff, a local mayor, and cultivate within your own local communities, living locally, the types of culture that we want to propagate. The reason why let me say this better. We have the opportunities with our constitutional Republican form of government to create safeguards for ourselves and for our families and for our communities by bolstering life at the local level. So much so that where we can resist to some degree what's happening at the national level. And as we creating these laboratories, these laboratories of liberty, if you will, at the local level, we can be able to show, hey, life on this side is a lot different. A great example of this is the movements that's happening in the West Coast. You have people who are California residents, but they're trying to move into Idaho because they find taxation is different, law is different, liberty is different, culture is different, community is different. And so they're trying to migrate into a different local community that more accurately reflects their values and beliefs. That opportunity only exists because of our constitutional Republican form of government. So as much as we see the corruption that's palpable on the national level and on the federal level, and that's something that we definitely want to see addressed ultimately, but I wouldn't want to wait to see, hey, maybe another 4-year election cycle. Maybe we can do this next year when somebody else is president. Let us do what we can on the local level. And one of the most important strident things is love your neighbor. Have robust community. Don't allow the things that's going percolating in the national media that cause you to look askance at the person who's closest to you. But love your neighbor to such a degree where you create the type of communities that you thrive in, where you can say, man, stuff that's happening on a national level is not happening right here at home.
I love it. Excellent advice. Abraham, last question. I know we're almost out of time, but you went from being a minister of God in government, right? That's what the Bible calls government officials. They are ministers of God. To now you're a minister of God in a different capacity. You are a teaching pastor at your local church, in addition to what you do through the radio, reaching huge numbers of people across the country with the message of the Bible and faith. Obviously, our churches are in a crisis right now. Our young people are leaving in droves. We've got wokeism being preached from pulpits, unfortunately, all across the country. Not all churches, but far too many. What's your advice to faithful Christians who are alarmed by this? So just some thoughts on what we should be doing as the church to try to get things back in order.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that can be done, but there's one thing in particular that Jesus himself instructed, and that was the Great Commission. Go therefore into all the world, cosmos in Greek, and make disciples of all nations. The Greek word there is ethnos, of all ethnicities, making disciples, teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you. The Great Commission, not surprisingly, isn't limited to evangelism. A lot of times, Christians in the past have limited the work of God to evangelism, which is a vital component of the Greek word there, euangelion, proclaiming the truths of the gospel. But the commission that Jesus gave us was to make disciples, disciplined learners of Christ, rearing people in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, helping people to understand the Romans 12 verses 1 and 2 phenomenon. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our minds as we rediscover the reality that the commission that Jesus gave us was to make disciples and not merely converts. Understand that God has given us in Christ and through his revealed word in the Holy Scripture a full-on comprehensive understanding of how we are to approach life. And in that, and this is why I said, and I know you discovered my program through me talking about the founders of Black Lives Matter and their pagan occultist roots. We don't need, as Christians, some antichrist Marxist organization founded by pagans to tell us how to love our neighbor. Jesus has already told us that. So because we already have that instruction, we don't need a new instruction. We need to simply resubmit ourselves to the initial instruction. And as we submit ourselves again to Jesus' commission to make disciples, we will have that cross orientation. The first command, love the Lord with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. The second one that is like it, as Jesus said, is to love your neighbor as yourselves. And as we do this, Jesus added, all men will know that you're my disciples by the love you show one to another. And so by rediscovering that and employing that in the interpersonal context and in interpersonal community, starting right in our own families and in our own churches, we will get to show a grave contrast between the wheat and the tares, as Jesus told us we will grow up together.
Amen, Abraham. I love it. I just absolutely love it. Thank you so much for that. What's the best way for folks to follow you, your radio show? How do people listen to that? And where can people find the American Family Association?
Yes, so you can find the American Family Association by simply going to afa.net. That is the clearinghouse for all that we offer. We have a lot of things going on there. You can find the American Family Radio Network by going to afr.net. We have over 180 stations around the country, and you can find us by downloading the AFR app, where you can listen wherever you may be. My program on American Family Radio is the Hamilton Corner. It airs daily at 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, or 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And you can follow me on social media at Hamilton Corner, anywhere you may do your social media. And you can download the Hamilton Corner podcast if you happen to be a person who prefers to listen to podcasts.
Fantastic. Abraham, thank you so much for all that you do for God and for our country and for the cause of truth. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
All righty, folks. Stay with us. We will be right back after these quick messages.
Did you know that there is a community of human beings that live to be well over 100 years old? The Hunza people live to be anywhere between 120 to 140 years old. Their secret? Vitamin B17. At Richardson Nutrition Center, we have developed a product line to easily incorporate B17 back into your diet. Use your special American Media Periscope code AMP888 to receive 15% off your first order at rncstore.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Alex Newman here with AMP. Thanks so much for staying with us. We have on the phone right now Ryan Samsel. He is one of the January 6th prisoners, and he's actually calling in from jail right now. He is waiting in jail. Ryan, thanks for being with us. We've got a short segment with you here. Tell us what is going on. One of the things you said to me before we went on the show was that the narrative that they are spinning, that Donald Trump is responsible for this, is totally false, and that you were actually at the breaking down of the barriers even before Donald Trump gave his speech. Walk us through that.
All right, so Donald Trump was still speaking at the Ellipse. Everybody in the crowd heard of a man named Ray Epps. Him and some others were telling everybody, "Hey, go to the Capitol, go to the Capitol. We're going into the Capitol." So Rachel and I, who is my wife, decided to walk down to the Capitol because we simply couldn't hear Mr. Trump speaking. And so we all walked to the Capitol where we were to converge. As we were walking to the Capitol, people were handing out pamphlets. And on the pamphlet, it was telling you to, to go onto the grounds. So as I pulled up, there was a big group of Proud Boys. Now, Trump is still speaking at the Ellipse. And this is about 12 o'clock, 12 something. Trump is still talking. Trump didn't get done talking until about 12:30, to the best of my knowledge. Long story short, I don't want to get into the little nooks and crannies because it's unimportant, but basically I got into an altercation with a small group who the FBI portrayed as Proud Boys, but really were not. The guy flashed a gun. I sent you a picture. I walked up to the barricades, Trump still speaking. As I pulled the barricades towards myself, a man by the name of Ray Epps whispered into my ear at the front gate and says, "No, we don't need to pull them. We need to push through them. I got people." On his count, about 100 people or so pushed the gates. A female cop to my right, about 15 feet to my right, had fell during the pushing the gates. I ran over, I picked her up so the crowd didn't stop all over her. I got farther up towards the front line, and there was a gentleman by the name of Joshua Black who was shot in the face. Trump's still talking. This is all going on. The chaos had already picked up. The cops opened fire on us. The bullet was in Josh's face. I stopped immediately, patched Mr. Black up. So I don't understand how my president's being charged with inciting a riot if I was the guy who was at the front line. I'm the very first person at that front line. I know what happened. Trump did not have anything to do with that. And if I have to take full responsibility for my president, then I would. It's sad to say, even if it was Mr. Biden, my duty as a citizen, we're to protect those in charge, and because we elect those to be in charge. I would even do it for Mr. Biden as much as I.
Ryan, let me ask you here.
Actively now,
Ryan,
senile president.
Ryan, let me ask you here. Would you testify to that fact in court? I mean, if you were called in as a witness by Trump's legal team, would you testify to that fact under oath?
Yes, I would.
Wow.
I certainly would, and I would ask that this get to Trump's legal team. In fact,
we'll get it to
Trump's attorneys is working with my attorney, Mr. Stanley Woodward. So yeah, if we can make that happen and it won't be a conflict, I would love to testify to for Mr. Trump.
Excellent.
And tell the truth, and not because I like Mr. Trump as a human being, but it's my duty as a citizen. I would die for any one of my presidents.
Yeah.
But needless to say, long story short, when I went to jail, I'm not sure. I was then beaten so severely. I lost the vision in my right eye, and then I lost use of my left arm. The FBI had wanted me to lie so bad and say it was the Proud Boys who had flashed the guns. They wanted me to keep Ray Epps' name out of my mouth. They did not want me speaking of what really happened. And I was confused. I really was confused. And when I realized that the person who had flashed the gun down at the Capitol was not a gentleman by the name of Joe Biggs, I told the FBI, I said, hey, I was wrong. That was not Joe Biggs. You guys have it wrong. I then was assaulted a second time, and then this time, so I lost the use of my arm and I lost the use of my eye. So thank God for Stanley Woodward, who also, I don't know if you've seen or not, but recently in the news that DOJ went to him and told him to pretty much turn on Trump and have his client turn on Trump, because his client is also Trump's co-defendant. If he would get his client to turn on Trump, they would promise him a judgeship, a position as a judge.
Wow.
My lawyer with
Ryan
made a report to the head judge.
Ryan, we're just about out of time on this segment. Hey, Ryan, we're just about out of time on this segment. Real quick, is there any way that people can follow your case? We'll try to get you back again soon, but is there any way people can stay on top of these developments?
Yeah, well, I actually need help fundraising money on my Give, Send, Go. I really need the help so I can continue to pay my lawyer. So if you can please post that and ask people to spread that around and help me fight the good fight, I'd really appreciate it. And it goes a long way. Even if it's $1, anything helps. Okay,
Ryan Samsel. Well, hey, we appreciate you giving this update. Please keep us posted. We will get you back on again as soon as we can. Thank you, sir, and best of luck to you behind bars. So thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you. All righty, folks, stay with us. We'll be right back for final thoughts. Welcome back to Liberty Hour, folks. I am your host, Alex Newman. Thanks so much for staying with us. And folks, if you're not signed up yet for AMP Insider, you need to be. It's where we're posting all kinds of exclusive content. You get to ask the experts, amazing stuff. going on over at AMP Insider. Plus, it helps us expand what we're doing and get the truth to more people. So go sign up for AMP Insider. You will not regret it. Final thoughts here, folks. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you were blessed by the information we shared. Our country is obviously in a crisis, but we have great fighters on the front lines. People like those who we have shared with you today, Kari Lake, Abraham Hamilton. And this is a fight that we cannot lose, folks. It just simply cannot be an option. So get involved somewhere. I don't know what God has called you to do. Maybe run for office. Maybe support somebody running for office. Maybe get involved in a local church. Maybe reach out to your neighbors and bring your community closer together for the turbulence that I suspect is coming. But whatever you do, get involved. Get involved now. Our country, our freedoms are all on the line. Take it to heart, folks. And God willing, we shall be with you again next week. Thanks so much again for tuning in to AMP. Support our sponsors. They are great. And thanks again for watching. Till next time, God bless you all.